Welcome to part 2 of this GoldMine tutorial, creating a simple dashboard. My name's Peter Johnson. In this part we're going to continue editing our sample dashboard for forecasted sales. We're going to add the chart. So the following items we're going to cover is creating a data source similar to part 1, but create a data source that's got some totals in it with some values that we can use within a chart. We're going to add the chart to the dashboard. We're going to bind the data source to that chart, and we're going to add an event so that when you click the chart it updates the data section within the table that we created during part 1. So let me just move to my test system to show you how to do this. Here we are at the example one that I showed you in part 1 that was already created, and you can see here that I have the chart broken up by the sales user, the person who the forecasted sales is against, which matches up to the sales rep column that we added to the table. And when we click on this, you can see it updates the table to just show the information about that particular sales rep. So to create this chart, I'm going to go back to our example we created in part 1, which we labeled in this samples area and called forecasted sales, and we're going to add our chart. To do this, I'm going to go into the design area. And again, just as we did before, the first thing I'm going to do is create a data source. Now the data source here is going to be again created using the open sales area. The reason I use this is that it's only going to show users with sales in it rather than all the users of the system. And I'll show you where that exists within the wizard and the SQL query. I choose next, just as I did before. So sales reps, I'm going to give this data source a descriptive name. I'm going to choose next again, and I'm going to add 2 columns this time. First is the sales rep's name, and what I'm going to use this is the activity owner, based on the fact that it's the forecasted sale against the user that forecasted it. So the activity owner, and I'm going to give this a name of sales rep. Just so if you looked at the data it would make sense. Okay. The next column I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize the amount field. So we use the amount field in the table, which was this field here, but this time I'm going to use some aggregation, which is to sum up the amount. So essentially it's going to group it by sales rep and give you an amount based on each sales rep's value. Choose OK. If I choose next, again it's only looking at forecasted sales, so we'll only get the users that have forecasted sales in the system. You could have taken a different approach and added all users, but this for this particular chart we only need the users with sales. Next, again I'm going to miss this section out. I'm going to come back to this very shortly to produce an event. Choose next, and in here you can see it's grouped it by the activity owner. Well, that's what we expected, because the other part is an aggregation, which is the summed value, and here's the final query that's been created and generated using the wizard. If I choose preview, you can see the output summarizes those values. So we've got the sales rep and the summed amount for each of the forecasted sales. If I now choose finish, and now we're going to add a chart to the screen. Drag and drop the component that you want, just as we did with the table before, and I'm going to stretch this chart so it creates an appropriate size. You can change the types of charts when you have it selected in here. Again, this properties area down here will allow you to change different aspects of the chart itself, so very easy to configure. And then we're going to add or bind the data to this chart. So if I right click and then choose edit data binding, just as we did with the table, same process, only this time it's a slightly different format to the window. Now if we think about a couple of values, and you would use different values based on how you want to see this chart, such as legends and things, and series on the right hand side, but I'm going to keep this really simple and I'm going to summarize the chart. Of course, first I would need to go and select the data source that I've created called sales rep. My apologies. Data summarized by sales rep, and the summary value, so the totals that it produces, is the amount. Okay, so if I choose OK there, we've now bound the data to that particular chart view. If I show you in the preview, you can see here we've got the output that we wish to use. But you'll notice here that nothing happens when I click. I'm clicking into these areas and nothing happens to the data. And that's because this part of the dashboard is not talking to this part of the dashboard yet. So we're going to go and do something called adding an event. And the event is that when somebody clicks this, it updates a different part of the dashboard. So based on that, I'm going to update the query that's in here. Now, for those of you that do know SQL queries, what we're going to add in this view is a select statement with a where clause, and we're going to say where the sales rep is equal to a particular value. Now you'll notice on here I didn't add the sales rep field, so I really need that in that value as well. So I'm going to design in here and go to this part of the dashboard. Now I want to get back to the data source. Now you can go back to a data source by choosing the data source manager and getting the correct data source, or if I right click on that component part, I can edit the data source that's attached to the table here. And you can see the select statement hasn't got the sales rep field in it, so I'm going to add that for the output. And the sales rep field is the activity owner. We're going to give it a descriptive column name, so choose OK. Now if I go right to the end of here and preview, you can see that it's added that new column now. Now it won't show in the actual view of the dashboard yet until you return to edit the data binding, and you'll notice because I've added another column here, it appears in the unbound fields. So I'm going to add it just for the purposes of seeing this on the dashboard. So choose OK, and we can see here I've now got that column. So I can go back and edit that data source some more to add some where clause or really criteria to this information. So back here I'm going to edit the data source again. Now the area I need to concentrate on here is this runtime parameter. Now essentially the runtime parameter is the bit that's going to be input when I click on another part of the screen. So if I were to write this manually, I would go to the query, and you can see here, here's the where clause, and I could say in here where activity owner is equal to Jane, and then that would just show Jane. So rather than write it in manually, we want to be able to populate it automatically by a selection from another part of the screen. So to do this, to update things automatically, we put in a parameter field. Now this looks a bit technical, but actually once you've done a couple of these, they're fairly simple and straightforward. But I'm going to add a new parameter, and you can see here I'm going to create a parameter and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it, just to keep this fluid, sales rep. So the parameter field here that I'm going to update is called sales rep, and the statement that it's going to produce is and activity owner is equal to. So if I choose OK, so essentially if we go and look at the query now, you'll notice there's a new parameter area here called sales rep, and actually this in the background says to the statement and activity owner is equal to, and then there's no value in there until we click another part. You could potentially, if I preview this, you can see it shows all, and if we select master as an option, if I go back to that parameter and edit this one, you could see here I could put a default value in and put master as an example. Choose OK. This is just to test this to make sure it's working in the query. If I now preview it, you can see the result is this actually says in the background and activity owner is equal to master, so it only produces that value. So you can see how this runtime parameter works manually. In a moment I'm going to update that parameter automatically. I'm just going to edit it and put back, take off that default value. I'm going to make sure it's working. Yes, it's showing all the values I'd like. Choose OK. Done. So now, rather than inputting a value into that parameter, I'm going to make the chart enter a value into that parameter. So right click and create an event on the chart. So the event on the chart is a state change. There's a number of different types that you can possibly use for other areas, but I'm going to add an event or an action to this particular event. The update dashboard part, so we're going to tell it to update a particular part of the dashboard. I want it to update the table. The data source of that table is listed there. The runtime parameter that I'm going to update by this is the runtime parameter that I've just created called sales rep. And then the value that I want to set when it's populated is from the chart. I want it to be the key value. The key value is the name of the sales rep in the columns. The value is the numeric values from that list. Remember, this is coming from a data source with a list of the users and a list of their total values. So the bit that I want to update the table with is the key value. So if I choose OK here, choose OK again, and then let's take a view of this and see it working. So we have the table showing all, but if I click on master, it's just showing those two. So by me clicking this, that query that's running the table is saying and activity owner is equal to master. If I click on this, it says activity owner equal to Jane, and then if I do this, it takes it back to all of the data. So you can see here in part 2 we've created this chart and then made that chart have a data source, and then the data source updates by way of an event what happens in the table, updating a parameter field. Thank you for attending the second part of this simple dashboard creation within GoldMine, and here are some contact details to contact us with any questions. If you have support, obviously you can call up, or you can ask us to create or help you through dashboards or any other GoldMine related topics. Thank you.